Nobody knows where he came from. Nobody knows where he'll go next. They just call him Gully. King once sent Gully's village a gigantic male elephant as a gift so the villagers could look after it. The creature was endlessly hungry and quickly ate every garden and field in sight. The villagers grew desperate. They begged Gully to speak to the king and ask him to take the elephant back. Gully walked ahead, the whole crowd following nervously behind him toward the king's camp. But as they got closer, the villagers one by one quietly disappeared, terrified of the king's anger. When Gully reached the king, he was completely alone. He glanced back, saw the empty road, and smiled to himself. The king frowned. "Gully, what do you want? And who are those people behind you?" Gully turned around slowly, looking at the hiding spots where the villagers had run, then faced the king with a big, innocent smile. "Your Majesty, we are truly grateful for the magnificent elephant you sent, but the poor animal is very lonely here. He has no friends, no companion." He raised his voice a little so the hiding villagers could hear. "That's why everyone was following me. They wanted to ask you for one small thing." Gully opened his arms warmly. "Please send him a female elephant too, so he won't be lonely anymore." During a long journey, a proud scholar grew bored and suggested a game to Gully. "If I can't answer your question, I'll give you 10 coins, but if you can't answer mine, you give me 1 coin. Fair?" Gully agreed. The scholar asked first, full of pride, "Why does the moon sometimes appear as a thin crescent and sometimes as a full circle?" Gully quietly handed him 1 coin. The scholar smiled. "Your turn." Gully looked him in the eyes and asked, "What goes up the hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4 legs?" The scholar thought hard. He wrote notes, drew diagrams, but couldn't find the answer. Finally, he gave up and handed Gully 10 coins. As they continued walking, the scholar asked curiously, "All right, I admit defeat. What is the thing that goes up with 3 legs and comes down with 4? Gully smiled innocently, took out 1 coin from his pocket, and gave it to the scholar. "I don't know either. Here's your coin." Gully was sitting in a tavern when he saw a poor traveler, warming his dry bread over the steam of a rich man's hot stew. The tavern keeper stormed over angrily. "You're stealing my steam! That's worth the price of a meal! Pay up!" The traveler panicked. "But I have no money!" Gully stood up calmly and said, "He's right. You did use his steam. That's only fair." The keeper grinned and held out his hand. Gully took out a handful of coins, held them next to the keeper's ear, and shook them loudly. Jingle, jingle, jingle. Then he calmly put the coins back in his pocket. The keeper stared, confused. "Hey, where's my money?" Gully shrugged with an innocent smile. "You heard the sound of my coins. If steam is worth a meal, then the sound of money is worth the payment. We're even." One day Gully was invited to a grand feast, hosted by a rich man. He arrived straight from working in the fields, wearing his old, dusty and patched clothes. The servants at the door looked him up and down and seated him in the darkest corner. No one greeted him. No food was brought to him. Gully said nothing. He quietly left, went home, and put on his most elegant robe. When he returned, the servants bowed deeply and seated him at the head of the table. The host gave him the best place and filled his plate with the finest foods. Everyone smiled and tried to please him. Gully took a spoonful of soup and slowly poured it onto the sleeve of his elegant robe. He leaned down and whispered to his robe, "Go on, eat, my friend, eat." The host stared in shock. "Gully, what are you doing? You're ruining your beautiful robe." Gully looked around at all the guests and said with a calm, innocent smile, "Why are you surprised? When I came in my old clothes, you wouldn't even let me sit properly. so this feast clearly isn't for me. It's for my robe. Therefore the food belongs to the robe as well.